Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my channel. This will be my first video and I'll be a commentator of sorts. I find it meaningful to voice my opinions, not to say that my opinions hold any intrinsic value over other individuals' opinions, but tonight we're going to be talking about vaping, which is a very interesting subject. It's been addressed a lot in the media and people have been talking about it quite a bit, how it causes a lot of illnesses, how it causes, quote unquote, it's an epidemic among teenagers and whatnot. We're going to talk about that stuff. We're going to talk about what's, an actual danger to teenagers and what's an actual it's propaganda. I think that I came across a video that was made by some college students. I don't think they really meant what they put in the video, but I'm using this as an example to talk about how this kind of propaganda or message can throw away the fact that vaping is a life-saving alternative to cigarettes. So, right before we get into it, I had to make this little clip just to satisfy my goofy self. Enjoy. Alright. I know it probably made you go deaf, but if you didn't go deaf, you can be reassured that I will never do something like this again. That is definitely not a lie. Don't worry about it. Alright, back to the point. People are responsible for their own actions regardless of their age, race, ethnicity, gender, etc. People are not to be told how to do something, when to do something, or why to do something, unless it is genuinely in their best interests to partake in a certain behavior or activity, in which you could argue, yes, not vaping would be in your best interest, and in which I would agree with you if the person was not vaping or smoking beforehand. However, that does not excuse people trying to step in and destroy personal freedom for the sake of the masses, quote unquote, that we will be saving people if we partake in a certain behavior that will limit other people's preferences as to why they want to partake in a certain behavior. An example of this would be people being told they can't go to the park and run because people hurt their knees while running. That sounds absolutely ridiculous, and I don't think anybody would actually listen to the person. Just because something can hurt you does not mean the ability of others to do that particular activity would indeed be justified. Now, I understand that you could call that a false equivalency, that running and vaping are two totally different things, and in which I'd agree with you. So let's use a more practical one. Let's say doing cocaine or vaping. What are the long-term effects? I'd have to say that hitting the vape stick every once in a while ain't gonna kill you as bad as your good old boy cocaine. But that may be an exaggeration. Maybe I'm using too big examples. So just deal with that. You could do this on your own, honestly. It's rationale. You get my. Individuals are responsible for their own actions and should be treated as such. Others should not be able to determine whether or not individuals are allowed to do X or Y, unless, of course, they are under a certain age, which is perfectly fine. There needs to be some sort of regulation, but not to the extent that you're trying to prevent something that shouldn't be happening in the first place. This should be met with combative parenting. School regulations, which are already in place. So I don't understand why we need to limit how many cherry-flavored Juul pods you can buy a month, alright? I don't think that makes any sense at all. Hence, why people are completely outraged about this. It doesn't make any sense. You got cherry, you got all sorts of flavored drugs, which are not helpful to anybody, but nobody's talking about a kid cracking open Mike's Hard Lemonade and fucking chugging that shit and how it's an epidemic, even though kids have been drinking for a very, very good amount of time. You know, you can go up to your dad and be like, did you drink when you were younger, before you were of age? And your dad will most likely say yes. Now, of course, there will be exceptions. I'm not saying that every man drinks underage, but there's a point here. You can't stop people from doing something if they're going to have the intention to do it anyways. They will figure out a way, and it's pointless to try and stop them unless you just want to make other people's lives miserable.
Proof of what this does. The pictures of his lungs, living proof of what vaping does to your lungs.
I mean, you could say that about literally anything, though. I mean, what does asbestos do to a person's lungs, man? I mean, there are all sorts of different arguments you could come up with this. Now, I do agree that you could most certainly choose to inhale this stuff, and that's a different story entirely. But we do need to chop up the differences between, you know, saying this is what something does to somebody's lungs and not saying this is what someone chose to do to their lungs, as assigning personal responsibility to the teenager or whoever.
You hid your vape underneath your pillows.
Yeah.
And you would come and smoke how often?
Oh, I couldn't go longer than like 10, 15 minutes without hitting it. It was so addicting. I brought it with me everywhere I went.
Again, another example of someone being portrayed as a victim in this situation, where instead they are the perpetrator amongst themselves. I mean, if you're gonna do this and you know that it hurts your lungs and you're gonna do it to the extent that you puff on your vape 200 to 400 times a day, I don't think that you should be able to display yourself as a victim, because at the end of the day, who put that device up to your mouth and, you know, took a hit? Did someone point a gun at your head and say, okay, if you don't take a hit, I'm gonna shoot you in the head? No, nobody did that. This is a matter of personal responsibility, and if you're not willing to take personal responsibility, then I don't think that you're an adult or that you're mature. And that's just a matter of life. Listen, I'm not an adult either. I'm not claiming that I am one. But people need to understand that personal responsibility is important in situations like these, so that people that wait until they're 21 to vape and all that nice stuff don't get their favorite flavor of vape juice or pod or whatever taken away because people like this want to paint themselves as the victim of big vapes mistakes, or people who manufacture juices mistakes, when in reality they went out, they decided to go and buy this stuff that literally kills you, but then have the audacity to paint themselves as a person who is not responsible for their own actions. It's just absolutely ridiculous. I don't think that kind of behavior should be rewarded, and I don't think that this young lady should have gotten the attention that she did. I don't think that people should be broadcasted on the news because they decided to do something to themselves and decided to devoid themselves of all responsibility. I mean, you don't hear about smokers dying on the news. You only hear about people that use vape products dying. And I mean, you can explain that however you'd like to. It's honestly a matter of personal opinion at this point. If you think it's a narrative, hey, I'm not going to tell you it's not a narrative. If you think that it's just because it's new, hey, that sounds like a perfectly reasonable observation to me. All I'm saying is that people are still responsible for their actions, even if they want to cast it onto somebody else that gave them the means to make their own choices with their own bodies. That's like saying that someone made me drink so much alcohol that I died, and it's an epidemic. No, nobody made me drink alcohol. Nobody makes me drink alcohol. If I consume alcohol, it was my personal choice at the end of the day. In conclusion today, guys, I don't care if you're underage and you vape. But if you decide that you're underage and you vape and you get some sort of illness because you're underage and you can't legally buy products, then blame it on the industries that make these illegal substances, for you at least, because you're underage, illegal substances that would then in turn harm someone's ability to get these perfectly legal substances for other people, because you want to cast aside your responsibility due to the fact that you don't want to get yelled at by mommy and daddy too hard for hitting that little vape. Alright, let's be real. So, at the end of the day, what people need to realize is that you personally are responsible for your actions. I've said this about 1,000,000 times throughout this video, but it's the truth. And the reason I've said it so many times is because it's honestly a very absent concept in our society. I mean, if someone gets someone pregnant, sometimes their natural response is to run away, tug their tail between their legs and run, man. I mean, sometimes that's what happens. Sometimes other things happen, but I'm not going to mention those because YouTube. It just is a fact of life that people aren't as responsible as they used to be. I mean, there always used to be irresponsible people no matter what timeline you go back to. It doesn't matter who you talk to. There will always be irresponsible people. And when those irresponsible people decide to make responsible people's life harder because they want to get attention on the news, I think that it should not be broadcasted. The news station should tell them to F off, and voila, end of the day. But that's just my take on it. What do I know? Life is good, life is weird, I don't know. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment, please leave a like. I would like to hear what you guys have to say. And yeah, peace.